The mountains around Telluride hold snow from November through April. They don't ask permission. They don't apologize. They just cover everything in white and make the whole world go quiet. He'd lived across the street from that empty house for 8 months. 8 months of dark windows. 8 months of a driveway nobody shoveled. 8 months of not thinking about the past, because the past was exactly where he'd put it. Then one December morning, a truck arrived. Then lights came on. Then she stepped onto that porch. And 16 years collapsed into the width of a street. He had a daughter who needed him. A custody battle about to tear his life open. A lawyer telling him to be careful. He had every reason to stay exactly where he was. He crossed the street anyway. Some doors, once opened, don't close the same way twice. The coffee maker died on a Tuesday. Not dramatically. Not with a bang or a spark or anything worth telling anyone about. It just stopped. Mid-cycle. Brown water dribbling onto the burner instead of into the pot. Steam hissing like it was personally offended. The whole kitchen filling with the smell of something scorched and given up on. Which, honestly, felt about right. Garrett Cole stood at the counter in yesterday's flannel and a pair of socks that didn't match, staring at the machine like it might change its mind. It didn't. He unplugged it, stood there another second, listened, singeing, off-key, enthusiastic. Completely wrong lyrics to a song he vaguely recognized from the radio, coming from upstairs. Getting louder as it came down the hall, Cora. She appeared in the kitchen doorway 30 seconds later, hair tangled from sleep, wearing a sweatshirt with a cartoon bear on it and pajama pants that were at least 2 inches too short. She looked at him, then at the coffee maker, then at the brown puddles spreading across the counter. Did it die? It's resting, Dad. It's dead. He grabbed a dish towel. It's fine. You said that about the toaster. The toaster is fine. The toaster caught fire. He didn't answer that, because she wasn't wrong. The toaster had in fact caught fire. Small fire contained. But still, Cora padded across the cold tile in her socks and pulled herself up onto the counter, sitting beside the dead machine with the authority of someone twice her age. She was 7. She'd been doing this, the sitting, the watching, the quiet cataloging of everything, since she was about 4. He'd stopped noticing when it had started feeling less like parenting and more like being gently supervised. "We need a new one," she said. "I know, before tomorrow I know, because you're mean without coffee." He looked at her. She looked back, not a trace of apology in those brown eyes. Eyes that were his in color and nobody else's in expression, because Cora had never once hidden what she was thinking. "I'm not mean," he said. "You said a bad word on Monday. That was about the furnace. You said a bad word about the furnace. The furnace deserved it." She tilted her head. Considered this with the seriousness it apparently required. Then, fair, he made her oatmeal. She wanted pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, and he attempted it, and the first one looked like a potato, and the second one looked like a slightly different potato, and by the third, he'd given up entirely on the concept of shapes and was just trying to produce something edible. She ate them anyway, drowned in enough maple syrup to qualify as a dessert. Humming to herself, kicking her feet against the cabinet doors, completely at peace with the world in the way that only children and people who've never had a mortgage can be. Garrett stood at the window with his glass of water. No coffee, just water, the saddest possible start to a morning, and looked out at the street. Telluride in December was a specific kind of quiet, snow on everything. The pines across the road wearing it like they'd been freshly painted. The sky that flat white that meant more was coming. He'd lived here for 9 years. Bought this house when Cora was born, when he'd still believed that square footage and good school districts were the foundations of a life. He still believed that, mostly. He'd just stopped expecting the other things that were supposed to come with it. The house across the street had been empty since April, for sale sign in March, gone by May. Whoever bought it hadn't moved in right away. 8 months of dark windows and a driveway that needed shoveling. He'd watched it the way you watch anything absent long enough to become part of the scenery. You stop seeing it. It becomes the empty house, until it wasn't. He'd noticed the lights 2 nights ago. Then yesterday morning, a truck. Big one. Professional movers carrying boxes and furniture, and something wrapped in so many moving blankets it could have been a piano or a person. Impossible to tell which. Helen Burke from 2 doors down had appeared at his elbow around noon. The way Helen always appeared, materializing out of nowhere with the timing of someone who'd been watching for exactly this moment. "Mercedes," she'd said. Without preamble, "Morning, Helen." parked right in front. Not one of the small ones either. She'd paused, clearly expecting him to respond as though this mattered. Someone with money, people with money moved to Telluride. That's kind of the whole thing, single, I think. Only one person directing the movers. Helen, I'm just saying. I know you're just saying, a woman, she'd added, right as she turned to leave. Like a grenade rolled gently across the lawn. Looked about your age. Very put together, and then she'd walked away. Because Helen Burke had never needed a response to land a point. Garrett had not thought about it again. He'd tried not to. He got Cora into her coat. Found her backpack under the couch, where it lived apparently, despite the hook by the door installed specifically for that purpose. Found one mitten in the bathroom, the other in the kitchen, neither one anywhere near mittens were supposed to go. Permission slip, he said. In my bag, you sure? Dad, I'm just asking. You ask every day. Every day you need to get somewhere with a permission slip. She shouldered the backpack with the long-suffering patience of someone who had been dealing with him for all 7 years of her life. He opened the front door. Cold air hit him immediately, sharp and clean, the kind that woke you up faster than any amount of coffee. He almost didn't look across the street. Almost, she was standing on the porch of the house that had been empty for 8 months. Black coat, long, the kind that suggested someone had paid attention to the details. Heels that made no sense in 6 inches of snow. Dark hair pulled back tight, phone pressed to her ear, free hand moving in short, precise gestures, jaw set in the way of someone whose morning was not going the way they'd planned. He didn't recognize her at first. 16 years. People change. The way they hold themselves shifts. The soft parts get harder or the hard parts soften. And sometimes you look at someone and the person you used to know is there somewhere but buried under everything that happened after. But then she turned. Just slightly. Enough. The morning light caught her face at an angle, and something in Garrett's chest did something it had no business doing. Dana Marsh, Dad, Cora's voice. Right beside him, he'd forgotten she was there. Are we here? He blinked, looked down at her. Yeah, let's go. He walked her to the car on autopilot, buckled her in, started the engine, checked the mirrors twice when once would have done. His hands were doing the right things. The rest of him was somewhere else entirely. Dina Marsh, 16 years. She'd kissed him in the parking lot behind the university library, 3 hours after graduation, with the whole summer and the whole rest of their lives theoretically ahead of them. Then she'd gotten in her car, driven away, and never called, never texted, never sent a word to explain why she'd done it, or what any of it had meant, or whether he'd imagined the whole thing. He'd spent a long time thinking about that night. He'd spent an even longer time learning to stop. He dropped Cora at school, drove to the office, sat at his desk and opened the project files he was supposed to be reviewing. He stared at them for about 4 minutes. Then he closed them, opened them again, closed them again. Dana Marsh was living across the street. Right, fine. Okay, he went back to work. He didn't see her again for 4 days. He told himself this was fine. He told himself a lot of things that week, that it was a coincidence, that it didn't mean anything, that he was 38 years old with a mortgage and a daughter, and approximately 3 hours of unscheduled time per week, which left no room for getting derailed by someone he used to know. He saw her car in the driveway. He didn't look at it. He toted her lights on in the evenings. He didn't think about it. He was doing fine. And then Sunday afternoon he was in the garage, halfway through an oil change on his truck, hands black to the wrist, radio low, and Cora came running in from the house with her socks on the wrong feet. Dad, there's someone at the door. He looked up. What someone? A lady. She has a bottle of something. He wiped his hands on a rag that didn't help. Stood, followed Cora back through the garage and into the house, through the kitchen to the front door, already knowing. Already, he opened the door. Dana Marsh, standing on his porch, holding a bottle of red wine, wearing a cream sweater and dark jeans and boots more sensible than the heels had been, and looking at him with an expression that was carefully, precisely, almost professionally neutral. For a moment neither of them said anything. Cora had no such problem. Hi, she said, from somewhere near Garrett's elbow. Are you our new neighbor? Dina's eyes moved down to her. Something in the neutral expression shifted. Just slightly, like a window opening a crack. I am. I just moved in across the street, I know. Dad was watching. I wasn't watching, Garrett said. You were watching. I was standing at the window, that's watching. He looked at Dina. She was not quite smiling, but close. I wanted to come by, she said. I got a note about the trash schedule. I thought that was you. It wasn't him. It was Helen, almost certainly, playing welcome committee without being asked. But he didn't correct it. Right, he said. Yeah, no problem, I brought this. She held out the wine. He took it. Their fingers didn't touch. He noticed that they didn't touch. Well, she said. A small step back. I should let you get back to whatever you were doing. Oil change, Cora offered helpfully. Sounds important. It smells bad. Dina smiled then. Brief. Polite. She looked at Garrett one more time, and for a second he thought she might say something else. Something real. Something that acknowledged the specific absurdity of standing here like this, 16 years and a street between them. She didn't. She turned and walked back across the street, and Garrett stood in his open doorway holding a bottle of red wine with grease on his hands. She seems nice, Cora said. Yeah, she has good shoes. Go put your socks on right. They are on right, Cora. She looked down at her feet. A pause. I'll fix them, she said, and disappeared back into the house. Garrett closed the door. Stood there a moment, set the wine on the hall table. Fine, everything was fine. The thing about a town like Telluride was that avoidance required effort, small enough that the same handful of places kept coming up. The grocery store on Colorado Avenue, the coffee shop on the main drag, the hardware store where he'd become, through years of small disasters, something close to a regular. He saw people he knew constantly. It was one of the things he'd liked about living here. Now it felt like a complication. He saw Dina on a Tuesday in the produce section, frowning at a bag of apples with an intensity they probably hadn't earned. He turned into the next aisle before she looked up. He spent 4 minutes examining granola he had no intention of buying. He saw her Thursday morning from the driveway, getting out of her car, looking at her phone with that expression she seemed to reserve for calls. Jaw set, eyes sharp. She glanced up. He waved. She waved back. Neither of them moved toward the other. By Friday, he had convinced himself this was the shape things would take. Polite, distant, manageable, and then Cora got sick. It started on a Friday night in late January. A cough, small, dry, nothing alarming. He almost didn't notice it over the sound of the movie they were watching, a cartoon about a dog that could somehow also fly, which Cora had seen at least 11 times, and still watched with the same complete attention she'd given it the first time. He gave her water. She drank it without complaint. He figured it was the dry winter air. Saturday morning she was still coughing, and when he put his hand to her forehead at 7 in the morning, it was warm, 101.4. He found the thermometer after searching longer than he should have, because the bathroom cabinet was a disaster. He called the pediatrician. Nurse said it sounded like a virus. Keep her hydrated, keep her rested, come in Monday if it wasn't improving. He could do that. He'd done it before. He sat with her on the couch and watched the Flying Dog movie again, and the one after it. He made her soup from a can, which she ate half of. She fell asleep at 6, and he carried her upstairs and sat in the chair by her bed for a while, listening to her breathe. Sunday the fever hit 103. He called the pediatrician again. Monday morning, first appointment, 8 o'clock. Come in, don't wait. He could handle Monday morning. He had handled worse, except Monday was the Hendricks presentation. He'd been working on the Hendricks project for 6 weeks. Community center renovation, mid-range budget, the kind of job that wasn't glamorous but was reliable and led to other jobs. The whole chain of things that kept the practice running and kept Cora in the school he liked and kept the mortgage from becoming a crisis. The meeting had been scheduled for 3 weeks. The clients had rescheduled it once already. If he cancelled again, he sat at the kitchen table at 5:45 in the morning, laptop open, presentation half finished. Cora asleep upstairs. It's outside, dark and snow and the silence of a mountain town before anyone else was awake. Helen was in Phoenix, visiting her daughter back Thursday. Susan was in Seattle. He didn't call her. He didn't call her for the same reason you don't knock on a wall to check if it's load-bearing when you already know the answer. He didn't have anyone else. He sat there and ran through it again. The math kept coming out the same. The doctor at 8. The presentation at 10. No solution in between. The knock came at 7:30. 3 knocks, quiet but clear. He went to the door, Dina Marsh. Standing on the porch in the cold, wearing jeans and a fleece pullover, hair in a low ponytail, holding a container with a lid on it that smelled, even through the cold, like chicken broth. I saw your lights on all night, she said. He stared at her. My bedroom window faces yours. A pause. Hard not to notice, she held out the container. Chicken noodle. My mother's recipe. It won't fix anything, but it's warm. He took it, still staring. How did you know something was wrong? I didn't. I guessed. She looked past him into the hallway. Is Cora okay? Fever. Since Saturday. Poor thing. Her eyes came back to him, took him in, the dark circles, the clothes he'd slept in, the look of a man who had been awake and worried and alone for 2 days. What do you need? I'm fine. You look like you haven't slept since Friday. I'm fine, he said again. And it was, the second time, even less convincing than the first. She waited, just waited. Not pushing, not filling the space with suggestions, just standing on his porch in the cold, waiting for him to say the actual true thing. I have a client meeting at 10, he said. I've been trying to reschedule it for 3 weeks and I can't. And I have to take Cora to the doctor at 8. And I don't, he stopped. I can stay with her, he looked at her, while you're at the meeting. I'm working from home today anyway. She shrugged like it cost nothing. It's not a problem. I can't ask you to do that. You didn't ask. I offered Dina, Garrett. She said his name like it was simple. Like it had always been simple. She's sick. You have to work. Let me help. He wanted to say no. He had a whole structure of reasons to say no. Most of them had to do with not needing things from people. A habit he'd built sometime around the time Susan left and had been quietly reinforcing ever since. But Cora needed to see the doctor, and he needed to finish this project, and he was out of options. Okay, he said. She nodded. Like it was settled. She's had medicine at 6, but it'll wear off by 10. And she wakes up slow, and she doesn't like loud sounds when she's... Garrett, he stopped. Go get ready for your meeting. I've got it, so he did. He came back at 1 o'clock. The presentation had gone better than well. The Hendricks couple had approved the main concept, asked for minor modifications, shaken his hand in the way that meant the contract was coming. He drove home through bright midday streets, feeling the release of 6 weeks of preparation turning into something real. He let himself in quietly. The living room was dim. Cora was asleep on the couch, tucked under her favorite blanket, the yellow one with the fraying hem she'd had since she was 3. A nature documentary played low on the television, something about migration patterns. Dina was in the armchair across the room, not on her phone, not working. Just sitting with a paperback, one leg tucked under her, a cup of tea on the table beside her. She looked up when he came in, put a finger to her lips, gestured at Cora. He nodded. They moved quietly to the kitchen. She woke up around 10, Dina said, ate some of the soup, went back to sleep about 20 minutes ago. Fever came down a little. Thank you, it came out rough. Seriously, I was out of options, I know. No judgment in it. Just fact. He looked at her across his kitchen. At this woman he'd known and lost and spent 16 years not thinking about, or trying not to, standing in his kitchen in a fleece pullover with a paperback in her hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. How was your meeting, she asked. Good. Really good, actually. Good. She picked up her tea. I'm glad. She was heading toward the door, and he said before he'd decided you didn't have to do this. She stopped. Looked back at him. I know. It's been a long time. We haven't. He tried to find the right word for what they hadn't been. Couldn't, it has. She held his gaze a moment. But she's a good kid, Garrett, and you looked like you needed someone in your corner. He didn't say anything to that. She left, walked back across the street in the afternoon light. He watched her go from the kitchen window, then went in and sat beside Cora while she slept, and thought about nothing in particular for a while. She offered to help again the next day, and the day after. It became a thing, the way things become things. Convenient first, then comfortable, then necessary. Before you notice, the shift has happened. Cora went to Dina's after school while Garrett finished work. He picked her up before dinner. They stood in Dina's doorway or on the front step and talked for a few minutes, and then a few more, and the minutes kept stretching without either of them marking it. He learned she'd built a tech company from 12 employees to over 200. That she'd left Denver because she needed something that felt less like a sprint and more like a life. That she made excellent coffee. That she had opinions about everything, delivered quietly, and was usually right. She learned he'd wanted to be in New York at 22, designing towers, working for one of the firms whose names you saw on skylines. That he'd ended up in Telluride because of Cora, and that he'd stopped feeling like he'd settled for something smaller about 3 years ago. That he burned everything he cooked the first time and got it right on the second. That he'd replaced the coffee maker 3 times with the same brand because he liked the way it looked, even though it was unreliable. That is a very you kind of decision. she said one evening. What does that mean? It means you prioritize how something looks over whether it works. I'm an architect. That's basically the job description, she laughed, short, sudden, surprised out of her. And Garrett felt something settle in his chest that he chose, for the moment, not to examine. The science fair came in late February. Cora had been working on a project for 3 weeks, a model of a volcanic eruption, complete with baking soda and a papier-mâché ski mountain. She and Dina had apparently built together on a Saturday afternoon when Garrett had a site visit. He hadn't known about the papier-mâché until he came home and found his kitchen covered in newspaper strips. Cora with grey paste in her hair and Dina at the sink washing her hands, looking completely unbothered. We needed a mountain, Cora had explained. You could have told me. You were working at the craftsmanship involved. At the level of detail that was impressive for a second grader's project while still looking, fundamentally, like a second grader had made it. I would have helped, he said. Cora and Dina exchanged a look. A whole conversation in half a second. You would have made it too precise, Cora said. What does that mean? It means it's supposed to look like I made it. He'd looked at Dina, who was very carefully examining the soap dispenser. He'd looked back at the mountain. Second place, he said. Easy, Dina said. Still not looking at him, she was right. Cora took second place. The volcano erupted exactly on cue, with an enthusiasm that earned real applause from the parents gathered around table 7. Cora accepted the ribbon with the composure of someone who had expected nothing less. After they went for ice cream. Cora's idea. She sat between them at a small table near the window, working through a scoop of something involving multiple kinds of chocolate, explaining at length the chemistry behind volcanic eruption to anyone willing to listen. Which was them. They listened. At some point, Garrett looked up from Cora's explanation of magma chambers and found Dina watching her with an expression he didn't have a word for. Something unguarded. Something that had slipped out before she could arrange her face properly. She noticed him noticing. Looked away. She's going to do remarkable things, Dina said, quietly, like it was just a fact she was filing. Garrett looked at his daughter, who was now reenacting the eruption with her spoon and her napkin. Yeah, he said. I know. The walk back to the cars was cold. Cora ran ahead. He and Dina walked at the same pace, not quite side by side, not quite apart. Thank you for the mountain, he said. For today I wanted to be here, she said it without dressing it up. They drove home in separate cars. He sat in his driveway for a minute after Cora went inside, looked at the house across the street, lights on in the kitchen, a shadow moving behind the window. He thought about the ice cream table, about the expression on her face. He got out of the car. He was in trouble and he knew it. He woke at 3 in the morning and couldn't get back to sleep. This wasn't new. He'd been waking at 3 since Cora was an infant, and his body had apparently decided this was the hour for accounting, of decisions made, decisions pending, things said wrong, things left unsaid. He lay there and thought about Dina, about the way she'd slipped into his life, not with announcement, not dramatically, just there. Soup in the morning, a paperback in the armchair, papier-mâché on his kitchen table, Cora's ribbon on the refrigerator door. He thought about what it meant that she fit this easily, that Cora had latched on without hesitation, that he was lying awake at 3 in the morning thinking about it. He thought, this is a problem. He thought, pull back, get some distance, be her neighbor, be polite. He thought about the way she'd laughed in his kitchen, surprised out of her, and how he hadn't heard that laugh in 16 years because he hadn't been anywhere near her, and he'd missed it without knowing he was missing it. He got up, got a glass of water, stood at the kitchen window dark across the street, probably asleep, completely unaware that over here, Garrett was having a quiet crisis about her. He told himself to go back to bed, stood there another minute, turned around, went upstairs, checked on Cora, one arm hanging off the mattress the way she always slept, mouth open, breathing even, and got back in bed. He would pull back in the morning. He was good at sensible. He didn't pull back in the morning. In the morning there was the new coffee maker. Practical, reliable, bought on Helen's recommendation after the death of the old one, and Cora's oatmeal, and the backpack under the couch again despite the hook, and the mittens in the wrong places again despite everything. There was the drive to school with the radio on, and Cora singing along to something she didn't know all the words to, which didn't slow her down at all. There was the regular morning, and then there was Dina's text 11:04 a.m. Quick question. Do you know anything about furnaces? He stared at it, typed back. What kind of question is that? Mine is making a sound. What kind of sound? Like a machine that has decided it doesn't want to be a furnace anymore. He almost smiled. That's specific. I'm trying to be helpful. He looked at his project files. Looked at the message. I can take a look after I pick up Cora. You don't have to do that. You've been watching my kid for 2 weeks. It's the least I can do. A pause, longer than usual. Then okay, thank you. He went back to work. Did, mostly. He showed up at her door at 6 with a toolbox and zero pretense that this was purely about a furnace. She answered in jeans and a grey sweater, hair down for once, something warm in her expression that she didn't quite bank in time. It's in the basement, she said. The basement was cold. Concrete floor, exposed beams, a furnace in the corner making a sound that was accurately the sound of a machine reconsidering its purpose. That's not good, he said, crouching beside it. Define not good. You should call someone. I called someone. He can't come until Thursday. Until Thursday you'll need. He opened the toolbox. I can patch it. Buy you a couple weeks. She leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching him work. He could feel her watching. He focused on the furnace. Why did you come here? He asked. Kept his voice even. Kept his hands moving to Telluride. You had a company in Denver. A whole life. She was quiet for a moment. I used to come here as a kid, every winter. My dad would take us up to the ski runs and my mom would make hot chocolate after. A pause. I don't know. It was the last place I remember things feeling simple. He didn't say anything to that. Just tightened the last bolt and stood. That'll hold for now, he said. But you'll need a replacement before spring. Great. She looked at the furnace with the expression of someone doing unwanted math. This house is going to cost me. That's home ownership. I had a perfectly good condo. You had a condo. Not the same as a home. She looked at him. Something moved across her face that he didn't try to name. No, she said. I guess it's not. He wiped his hands, started closing the toolbox. Let me buy you dinner, she said. He stopped. The Italian place on the main drag. You spent an hour on my furnace. He should have said, you don't have to do that. He should have said, rain check. He said, okay. The restaurant had checkered tablecloths and candles and wine that arrived before the menus. They waited 20 minutes for a table, and by the time they sat down he'd almost convinced himself this was just two people being neighborly. Then she started talking about her company, how she'd built it from a spare bedroom and a loan she hadn't told her parents about, how it had grown faster than she was ready for, how some days running 200 people felt like keeping plates in the air with her eyes closed. He found himself leaning in, genuinely listening. Do you love it? He asked. Running something that size. She considered this the way she considered everything. Fully, without performing it. Some days. Other days it feels like I'm just keeping things from falling apart and calling that leadership. Isn't that what leadership usually is? She tilted her head. Maybe. She reached for her wine. What did you think you'd be doing at 38? Something bigger, he said. When I was in school, I had plans. New York, big firm. Buildings that would end up in architecture magazines. He looked at his glass. Then life went a different direction, Cora. Among other things, do you regret it? He thought about the versions of himself that hadn't happened, the skylines without his name on them. No, he said. Not the way I thought I would. She nodded slowly. Her hand was on the table. He was not looking at it. You asked me something once, she said. A few weeks ago. Why I left that night. She paused. You didn't quite ask, but I could tell. He said nothing. Waited. I was 22, she said, and scared. And I knew I could feel the way you feel things at that age when everything is too close, that if I stayed I was going to make a mess of it. So I left first, a beat, which was, in hindsight, also a mess. Yeah, he said, I'm sorry. He looked at her across the table in the low light and thought about the parking lot, the night air, the way she'd looked at him like he was something for worth keeping. The silence that followed. I think we would have made a mess of it either way, he said. We were 22, she smiled. Something sad in it. Probably. They finished dinner, walked to their cars in the cold, the shops closed, the street quiet, snow falling in the steady way it did here. Not dramatic, just constant. Tonight was good, she said. At her car. Hand on the door, yeah, it was. She looked at him one more time. Something in her expression he didn't let himself read in the dark. Good night, Garrett, good night. She got in, drove the 2 blocks, home. He stood there and watched her go, then walked to his own car and sat for a minute. He was in trouble. He knew it completely now. He drove home. checked on Cora, one arm off the mattress, yellow blanket, mouth open, the absolute peace of a child who trusts that everything will be there in the morning. He stood in the doorway a moment, turned off the hall light. At 11:40 his phone rang, unknown number, male voice. Professional, unhurried. Is this Garrett Cole? Yeah, my name is Stephen Ward. I'm an attorney calling on behalf of Susan Cole. She's asked me to contact you regarding a proposed modification to your current custody arrangement for your daughter Cora. Garrett went very still. Ms. Cole intends to petition for primary custody. You'll be receiving formal documentation within the week. I'd recommend securing legal representation. The line stayed open. Garrett didn't speak, Mr. Cole. Yeah, he said. I heard you. He ended the call. Sat in the dark, across the street, one light still on in Dina's house. Warm yellow in the upstairs window. He looked at it for a long time. Then he put the phone face down on the nightstand, lay back, and stared at the ceiling. Cora was asleep 8 feet away. He wasn't going to lose her. He wasn't. But for the first time in 7 years of doing everything right, of holding all of it together, alone, without being asked to be thanked for it. For the first time, he was genuinely afraid. He didn't sleep. Not really. He lay in the dark and did the thing that wasn't sleeping, the lying still, the eyes closed, the body not moving, while his brain ran laps around the same 2 sentences. Primary custody, formal documentation within the week. At 4 in the morning he gave up, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table with his hands around the mug and looked at the wall. Susan had left when Cora was 6 months old, not with drama. Not with screaming or thrown things or the kind of exit that at least had the decency to feel like an ending. She'd just receded. Like a tide going out slowly enough that you didn't notice until the waterline was already gone. One morning she'd been there, the next she'd been somewhere else, and in the weeks that followed it became clear that somewhere else was where she intended to stay. She'd signed the papers, taken her things, called Cora on birthdays sometimes. And the calls had gotten shorter each year until they were more like receipts than conversations. Proof of existence. Nothing more 7 years. He'd been doing this for 7 years, alone. And he'd stopped thinking of it as alone a long time ago, because that framing made it sound like something was missing. Nothing was missing. He had Cora. He had work he was good at. He had a house that was drafty in February but warm everywhere else. He had a life. And now Susan wanted to take the center of it because she was getting remarried, because this man, Greg, a lawyer, 2 incomes, house in Seattle, had decided that Cora should be part of his family. His family. Garrett's jaw tightened around the word. He called her at 7. She picked up on the 3rd ring. I figured you'd call, she said. What are you doing, Susan? Not a question. A flat line. I'm trying to do right by Cora. You haven't seen her in 14 months. Silence. You don't know her schedule, he said. You don't know her teacher's name. You don't know she's allergic to pine nuts. We found that out in October. Did your lawyer mention that in the petition? Garrett, what do you actually want? Another silence. Longer then. Greg thinks it's important for Cora to grow up with 2 parents, a real family structure. And I've been thinking I made mistakes. I want to fix them. By taking her away from me, by giving her more. He stood up from the table, walked to the window. The street outside was gray and still, last night's snow undisturbed on every surface, no tire tracks yet. You're not taking her, he said. That's not your decision alone. The hell it isn't, Garrett. Her voice had shifted, careful now, measured. The voice of someone who'd talked to a lawyer before making this call. I'm not trying to punish you. I'm asking for a chance. 7 years too late, I know that. A pause, I know. But Greg, stop saying his name to me. She went quiet. I'll see you in court, he said, and hung up before she could answer. He stood at the window for a long time after. Then he went upstairs, opened Cora's door. She was still asleep, yellow blanket pulled to her chin, one arm hanging off the edge of the mattress the way she always slept, mouth open, the complete picture of a person with nothing to worry about. He watched her breathe. He thought, not a chance, not one single chance in this world. Karen Aldridge had an office on the 2nd floor of a building on Colorado Avenue. It smelled like coffee and old wood and the specific calm that came from someone who had spent 20 years in family law and had stopped being surprised by any of it. She was in her late 40s, sharp-featured, with the kind of face that didn't waste expressions. She listened to everything he said without interrupting. Then she said, "She has a case." He felt the words land. She hasn't been a parent. She's been a parent in the legal sense. Her name is on the birth certificate. she has standing. Karen set down her pen. What she's filing is a modification request based on changed circumstances. Her remarriage. The argument that a two-parent household provides greater stability. These aren't frivolous claims. A judge will hear them. What do I do? You build a record. She folded her hands on the desk. Everything you've done for the last 7 years, you document it. Doctor's appointments, school events, who picked Cora up when she was sick, who made the dentist appointments. I need all of it. She paused. And you need to be clean. I am clean. I mean your personal life. She looked at him steadily. Are you in a relationship? He thought about the Italian place, the low candlelight, the wine, the walk to the cars in the cold. No, he said, seeing anyone, no. Is there someone who could be characterized as a romantic involvement? A longer pause. There's a neighbor, he said. She's been helping with Cora while I work. We've had dinner once. That's it. Karen studied him with the patience of someone who had heard many versions of that's it. In family court, perception carries as much weight as reality. If there's any ambiguity about the nature of that relationship, opposing counsel will find it and use it. She picked up her pen again. Keep things simple, keep them quiet, and if anything changes, if the situation with this neighbor develops in any direction, you tell me first. He nodded. He drove home thinking about how strange it was. To have something, or whatever it was, the dinners and the doorways and the hours he spent trying not to think about her, reduced to a variable, a thing to be managed. He parked in the driveway. Look at the house across the street. Lights on in the kitchen. 7 in the evening. She'd be working probably, or reading, or doing whatever she did in those rooms. He'd been inside exactly once, and only for a furnace. He went inside, made Cora's dinner, helped with homework, read 2 chapters of the book they were working through, a story involving a girl, a dragon, and a series of misunderstandings that Cora found endlessly funny, and he found, quietly, moving. He tucked her in, turned off the light, went downstairs, stood at the window. He needed to be more careful. He told himself that clearly, and almost believed it. Warren Holt arrived on a Thursday. Garrett didn't know that's who it was at first. He just saw the car, dark blue rental, parked in front of Dina's house, when he came back from the hardware store around noon, and then he saw the man on her porch, tall, very tall, dark coat, well-fitted, the kind that got dry cleaned, hair that looked like someone had been paid to arrange it. Yellow flowers in his hand, Garrett sat in his truck in his own driveway and watched the front door of the house across the street open. Dina, in weekend clothes, jeans, a cream-colored sweatshirt, hair loose. She looked at the man, at the flowers. Her expression from this distance was impossible to read. She didn't close the door, she didn't invite him in either, just stood there. They talked on the porch for a few minutes. Then she stepped aside. He went in, the door closed. Garrett sat in his truck another 30 seconds. Then he got out, got the hardware store bags from the truck bed, and went inside. Started on the kitchen cabinet hinge he'd been meaning to fix for 3 months. He was fine. He fixed the hinge. Moved on to the bathroom one then. The step on the stairs that had been squeaking since approximately the beginning of time, very fine. At 8 that evening, after Cora was in bed, his phone lit up. Dina, can I come over for a minute? Garrett, sure. She was at the door in 2 minutes. Coat over her sweatshirt, which meant she'd been cold in her own house, which meant she'd probably been sitting somewhere not moving for a while. He stepped back to let her in. She sat at the kitchen table, both hands around nothing. She'd come without anything to hold, which was unusual for her. She almost always had coffee or her phone or a book. He sat across from her. Waited, that was Warren, she said. I figured, my ex-husband. She looked at the table. He flew in from Portland, didn't tell me he was coming. A pause, he brought flowers. I saw, he says he's changed. Her voice was stripped of something. Not angry, just flat in the way things go flat when they've been through the same argument too many times. He says leaving me was the biggest mistake of his life, that he's been in therapy, that he understands now what went wrong, and he wants to try again. Garrett said nothing. He had a whole speech. She pressed her lips together. It was a very good speech. What did you say? I said I needed to think about it. She looked up. Her eyes were tired in the way you get tired from carrying something that keeps getting heavier. I know that's not. I know it's not what you want to hear. I want to hear what's true, he said. What's true is that he was terrible for me. She said it simply. No heat in it. He wasn't cruel. He never raised his voice. He just made everything smaller. Every plan I had, every decision, everything I wanted. It went through him first, and it always came out reduced. And I spent 3 years thinking that was just what love was. Negotiating yourself down until you fit. She stopped, looked at the window over the sink. Then I left. And it took me 2 years to remember what I actually thought about things. What I wanted without asking permission first. A beat, and now he's here. Saying all the things I wanted him to say 3 years ago. And some part of me, she stopped again. Some part of you what, Garrett said. Wanted to hear it. She met his eyes. Even knowing it's too late. Even knowing it changes nothing. Some part of me just wanted to hear that I mattered enough for someone to come find me. The kitchen was quiet. Outside, wind moved through the pines. A branch tapped the window once and went still. Garrett looked at this woman across his kitchen table, who had come back across 16 years and a street and a bottle of wine and a dying furnace, and felt something pull in his chest that he didn't have a clean word for. You matter, he said. For what it's worth. She looked at him for a long moment. I know, she said quietly. I'm just trying to remember it without needing someone else to say it. She left 20 minutes later. He sat at the table after she was gone and looked at the space where she'd been. Fine, everything was absolutely fine. Warren stayed. That was the thing. He didn't come for a day. He booked a room at the hotel on the main street and he stayed. And Garrett knew this because he saw the dark blue rental in front of Dina's house on Friday evening and Saturday afternoon and Sunday morning. He told himself not to look. He looked. He fixed every loose, squeaking, or otherwise imperfect thing in his house that week. The cabinet hinges, the stair step, the bathroom faucet, the closet door that had been sticking since October. He reorganized the garage. He pressure-checked the furnace. Cora watched all of this with the quiet attention of someone taking notes for a report she'd write later. Why are you fixing everything? She said on Saturday, standing in the garage doorway in her wolf sweatshirt, watching him sort through a bin of spare hardware. Because it needs fixing. It didn't need fixing last week. Last week I was busy. You're always busy. She tilted her head. Are you upset about something? No, you make that face when you're upset? What face? The one you're making right now. He put down the bin. I'm fine, Cora. She looked at him with the clear, unhurried patience of someone who had been reading him since she was 4 and had gotten very good at it. Okay, she said, and went back inside. He stood in the garage. He was not fine. He knew what he was specifically. He was jealous of a man he'd never spoken to over a woman he had no official claim on, while simultaneously trying to build a legal case, proving he was a stable and rational father. The irony was not something he wanted to examine closely. Karen called on a Monday morning. We have a problem. He closed his office door, sat down. What kind? Susan's lawyer filed a supplemental motion this morning. They're arguing that your home environment is unstable due to a romantic involvement that may be affecting your daughter's welfare. He was quiet. Garrett. Karen's voice was precise. Careful in the way of someone who knew the next sentence was going to land hard. The neighbor, Dina, is not a romantic involvement. They have testimony suggesting otherwise. From who? A pause. Helen Burke. He closed his eyes. Helen. Helen, who'd been the first one to tell him about the Mercedes. Helen, who'd babysat Cora a dozen times, who showed up at every school event, who left baked things on doorsteps without being asked. Helen, who had not one bad bone in her entire body and who told the truth when people asked her questions, because that was simply who she was, and someone had asked her questions. She wasn't trying to hurt you, Karen said. I know, but the information is in the record now. And they're going to use it to argue that you've introduced an unstable romantic element into Cora's home environment. A pause. Is there anything about this situation you haven't told me? He thought about the Italian restaurant, the walk to the cars, the way she'd looked at him and he'd looked away first. We had dinner once, he said. She watched Cora when I had work. That's the full extent of it. Has anything happened that could be characterized differently? A longer pause. Once, he said. There was a moment. It didn't go anywhere. Karen was quiet for 3 seconds. That moment is now a liability, no judgment. Just the terrain as it was. You need distance. Nothing visible. Nothing that can be witnessed or reported. And you need to tell her, Garrett. She needs to know she may be contacted. He hung up, sat in his office, looked at the wall. There was a drawing Cora had made when she was 5, framed on the wall across from his desk. A house with a yellow door and 2 figures standing in front of it, one tall, one small. She'd labeled them in her 5-year-old handwriting, Dad and M.E. Father's Day, 3 weeks after she'd learned to write her name. He looked at it for a long time, then he texted Dina, "Can I come over tonight? It's about the custody case." She replied within a minute, "Cora okay?" "She's fine. It's not about that." A pause. Then, "I'll be home." He went after Cora was asleep. 9 o'clock. Cold enough that his breath showed on the short walk across the street, Dina answered the door with a book in her hand. She'd been reading when he knocked, finger still marking her page. She looked at his face and put the book down without a word. "Come in," she said. They sat in her living room. She'd made tea. 2 cups already on the table, which meant she'd expected this to take more than a minute. "Susan's lawyers know about you," he said. She didn't move. "They know you've been watching Cora, that we've spent time together." He looked at her. "They have a witness statement. They're going to argue I've introduced instability into Cora's home life." She was quiet for a moment. Then, Helen, she nodded. "Once? She doesn't have a bad bone." "I know. She just answers when people ask." "I know." He leaned forward. "Karen says they might contact you, ask about our relationship, about how much time Cora spent here. What do you need me to say?" "The truth, that you were helping a neighbor, that Cora came over because I had work commitments. That's it." She held his gaze, and the rest of it, he looked at her, the rest of it. The evenings in the doorway, the dinner, the walk to the cars, the way this had been becoming something neither of them had named, but both of them knew. "On paper," he said carefully, "it needs to be nothing." She looked at him for a long moment. Her face was composed. The kind of composed that came from deciding something. "Okay," she said. "I can do that. I'm sorry, don't be." She picked up her tea. "You're protecting your daughter. That's not something you apologize for." He wanted to say something else. Sat there trying to find it. "There's something else," he said. She waited. "Warren, are you?" "He's still in town." She set the tea back down. "He wants to keep talking." "I haven't decided yet." Garrett said nothing. "I know," she said. "I know this is a terrible time for me to be uncertain, but I am. And I'd rather tell you that than pretend otherwise." "I appreciate that," he said. "Because what else was there?" He walked home in the cold. Stood in Cora's doorway when he got back. She was deep asleep, one arm hanging, the yellow blanket, the breathing that was the most reliable sound in his life. He thought about what Karen had said. Create distance, nothing visible. He thought about what Dina had said. "I'd rather tell you that than pretend otherwise." He thought about Warren Holt with his dry, cleaned coat and his flowers and his speech. He went to bed. He did not sleep. The week that followed settled in like cold through a wall, not dramatic, not announced. Just there, when you stopped and noticed. He went to work, picked up Cora, made dinner, helped with homework, read the dragon book, did all the things that were his life, and did them with the full knowledge that someone might be watching. Not literally, but potentially. At any moment, someone could be taking notes. He stopped going to Dina's in the evenings. Cora noticed immediately. "How come we don't go see Dina anymore?" She said on the 3rd evening, "She's busy." "With what work things?" Cora chewed her dinner, considered this. "She sent me a picture this morning of a bird she saw outside her window." He looked up. "She text you?" "We have a little thing," said completely without self-consciousness. "She taught me how to text last month." His 7-year-old had a texting arrangement with the woman across the street, established without his knowledge, and apparently this was just how things were now. He didn't know how to finish. "That's fine, so she's not that busy, Cora. I'm just saying." She ate another bite. "Also, her birthday is next week." She mentioned it by accident. She didn't want to make a big deal. He had not known that. "Can we get her a card?" Cora said. "From both of us." He looked at his daughter across the dinner table. At the matter-of-fact way she'd said "from both of us," like this was already the established order of things. "Yeah," he said. "We can do that." Warren Holt found him on a Tuesday. Garrett was coming back from the post office, collar up, hands in his pockets, the kind of walk that was more about clearing his head than getting anywhere. Warren was coming out of the coffee shop on the main drag, and there was no angle of approach that would have let either of them pretend they hadn't seen the other. Warren saw him, paused, made the decision. Cole, Garrett stopped. Holt, a moment where both of them understood this was happening. Warren fell into step beside him, which was presumptuous. Garrett didn't say so. "She talked to you," Warren said. "Barely a question. Some. Tell you about our conversation. Some." Warren looked at the street ahead of them. He was up close, less assembled than he'd seemed from across the road. There were lines around his eyes, a tiredness to him that the good coat didn't quite cover. He looked like a man who had been thinking hard about something for a long time and had followed the thinking to a place he hadn't anticipated. "She's different here," Warren said. Garrett said nothing. "In Denver, she was always running something. Always in motion. I used to think that was just who she was." He paused. "Now I think she was running from how things felt when she stopped moving. Why are you telling me this?" Warren glanced at him. "Because you need to understand what you're getting into. She doesn't let people in easily. When she does, she's all the way in. And when it breaks, she doesn't break in the ways you can see. She goes very quiet. And then she moves across the state and rebuilds everything from scratch and calls it starting over." Garrett kept walking. "She told you about the furnace," he said. "She told me about everything." Warren's voice was level, no anger in it, just the tone of someone reporting facts they'd made peace with. "That was the first thing she'd done in years that didn't involve me knowing about it first. She was proud of herself. In this quiet way she has," he paused. "I think she wanted me to understand what it felt like. To be the last one to know." They reached the corner. Garrett stopped, turned to look at Warren, a man who had come a long way to try to fix something he probably already knew couldn't be fixed. "Who had come anyway? Why are you still here?" Garrett said. Warren looked at him. Something honest moved across his face. The kind of honest that didn't have anything left to protect. "I thought if she saw me enough times, she'd remember the good parts." A pause. "But she does remember them. She's just decided they're not enough." He looked down at the sidewalk. "I think that's the right call. I just needed to hear her say it directly." He looked back up. "She will. She's working up to it." He turned and walked back the way he'd come. Garrett stood at the corner for a moment. Then he went home. She said it on Thursday. He didn't witness the conversation, but he saw the aftermath. Late afternoon, coming back from a site visit, truck in the driveway, and Dina was standing on her porch, alone. Warren's rental car was gone from in front of her house, just her, arms crossed, looking at the middle distance. Without deciding to, he crossed the street. "You okay?" he said. She looked at him, eyes dry, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "I told him no," she said. "Okay." He pushed for a while. Then he stopped. She uncrossed her arms, let them hang. He said goodbye the right way, which was, she stopped. It was decent. He was decent about it. "That's good, yeah?" She looked at the empty curb where his car had been. He said something before he left. He said I was the best thing that ever happened to him, and he understood why he couldn't be the same for me. Garrett was quiet. "That's an awful thing to be right about," she said. "Yeah," she looked at him. And for a second, just a second, something in her expression went very still. Not the composed still. The other kind. The kind that happened right before something changed. "I know the timing is terrible," she said. "It is, and I know you need space from me right now." She said it without bitterness. "From whatever this is, I do. I'm not asking for anything," she said it clearly. "This wasn't a setup for something else. I just wanted you to know. Warren being here, sending him away, that wasn't about you." She held his gaze. "It was about me. Finally being about me." He stood there in the cold, understood what it cost her to say that. This woman who'd spent 3 years negotiating herself down and 2 more years learning how to stop. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said. He went back inside, stood in the kitchen, said nothing to anyone, but something in his chest, the tight thing, the 7 years built thing, the part that had learned to keep the door shut and call it being responsible, shifted. Not open, but no longer completely locked. 4 days before the hearing, Susan called, not through the lawyer. Her voice directly, which he hadn't heard in almost 2 years. "I don't want this to be a war," she said. "Then drop the petition." "I can't do that. Then we don't have anything to talk about, Garrett. Just listen." A pause. He didn't hang up. That surprised him. "I know I wasn't there. I'm not going to stand here and argue that I was. I made choices and I know what they cost." Her voice was careful. Tired, maybe, or genuinely sorry. He couldn't tell anymore and wasn't sure it mattered. "But Greg and I have something stable. Something real. And I look at what I'm building and I think Cora deserves." "Don't," he said. "Don't tell me what she deserves. I'm her mother. You're her mother who didn't call on her birthday last April." Silence. "You're her mother who has seen her twice in the past 18 months. Who doesn't know her teacher's name, who doesn't know about the pine nut allergy, or that she sleeps with one arm off the bed, or that she's been teaching herself to read star charts since September." He stopped, breathed. "You don't get to use the word deserve." Susan was quiet for a long time, then softly, "Are you fighting this because you love her?" or because you can't stand the thought of your life without her at the center of it. He went very still. Those are different things, Garrett. Her voice wasn't cruel. That was the worst part. It was gentle, and a judge is going to ask. He hung up. Stood in the kitchen. The house was quiet. Cora was at school. The only sound was the furnace. His furnace, doing its job the way it always did, invisible and reliable and taken completely for granted. He stood there for a long time. He was not going to let that question in, but it had already gotten in, the way cold gets in. Through the gaps you didn't know were there. He told Karen about the call that afternoon. She's listened. When he finished, she said, "It doesn't matter what she said. What matters is what we can prove." She tapped her pen on the notepad. "I've pulled everything together. 7 years of documentation. It's solid." She looked at him. "Are you clean?" "Yes." "The neighbor?" "We haven't been in each other's homes since you told me to create distance." "Good." A pause. "They're going to go after your emotional stability, your work schedule, your relationship history." She looked at him steadily. "They'll ask if you've been in a romantic relationship since the divorce." "I'll say no. That's technically accurate?" "Technically." She nodded. Moved on. He was grateful she moved on. The night before the hearing, he lay in bed for an hour before admitting sleep wasn't coming. He got up, made tea because coffee felt wrong at that hour, stood at the kitchen window. The street was dark, snow on everything. His breath touched the glass and faded. He looked across at Dina's house, one light on. Upstairs, warm yellow in the window. As he watched, her front door opened. She stepped out onto the porch, coat on, hands in pockets. She looked across the street. She saw him. He raised a hand. Not a wave. Just acknowledgement. Proof of presence. She did the same. They stood there, on either side of a quiet street, in the middle of a cold night, and looked at each other through the dark. Then she pressed her hand flat against her chest. One slow, deliberate motion. He understood it. She was saying, "I know, I'm here, not across the street. Here." In the way that counted, he pressed his own hand to his chest. She nodded. She went back inside. He stood at the window another minute. Then he went upstairs, opened Cora's door, stood in the rectangle of hall light and watched her breathe, one arm off the mattress. The yellow blanket, mouth open. 7 years of standing in this doorway, 7 years of this being the truest thing in his life. "I'm going to keep you," he said, quietly. Not to her, to himself, to the room, to whoever was listening at that hour. Whatever it takes. He went back to bed. This time he slept. The courthouse smelled like floor wax and recycled air. Garrett had been in courthouses before. Permit hearings, zoning disputes, the kind of institutional architecture that existed to process things efficiently, not to comfort the people being processed. He'd always found them neutral, functional, just buildings doing their job. This one felt different, maybe because the thing being processed was Cora. He sat beside Karen at a long table, back straight, hands flat on the surface. Across the aisle, Susan sat with her lawyer, a man named Alderman, silver-haired, trim, the kind of attorney who looked born to the work. Susan wore a navy blazer. She looked older than he remembered, more deliberate, like she'd dressed for something important and was acutely aware of it. She glanced at him when he sat down. He looked back. Neither of them nodded. Cora was not here, Karen's call, and he'd agreed with it without loving it. Cora was at school. Regular Tuesday. He'd told her he had a meeting this morning. Technically true. She'd asked what kind. He'd said boring grown-up stuff. She'd accepted this with the equanimity she brought to most things and gone back to her oatmeal. He hadn't told her what was at stake. He would tell her after, when he could tell her how it ended. Judge Patricia Horn entered from a side door. The bailiff said the things bailiffs say. Everyone stood, then sat. Early 60s, grey hair cut close. Reading glasses on a chain around her neck that she put on immediately, and used to review the file in front of her with the focus of someone who had been doing this a long time, and still took every case seriously. He liked her immediately. He didn't know if that meant anything. "This is a petition for modification of custody," Judge Horn said without looking up. "Miss Cole is requesting primary physical custody of the minor child, Cora, age 7. She turned a page. "Mr. Cole is the current custodial parent and is contesting this petition." She looked up over the glasses. "Counsel for petitioner, you may proceed." Alderman was good. Garrett had expected good. Karen had warned him. These lawyers were professionals at making ordinary things sound alarming, and Alderman had the skill of it. He spoke in a calm, reasonable voice that made everything he said sound self-evident. Simply a matter of looking at the facts clearly. The facts, as Alderman presented them. Garrett's work schedule was demanding. He regularly worked past 5 in the afternoon. He relied on informal childcare, a neighbor specifically, rather than licensed or structured after-school programs. His household income, while adequate, was not growing at the rate of a 2-income household. And his personal life, Alderman noted carefully, had included a romantic involvement with the aforementioned neighbor in the months leading up to these proceedings. The minor child spent significant time in the home of a woman Mr. Cole was romantically involved with, Alderman said. This is not a criticism of that woman. It is an observation that the child's primary residence had effectively become shared between 2 households, without any formal arrangement or stability guarantee. Karen was on her feet before he finished the sentence. Objection to characterization, Your Honor. The child spent time in a neighbor's home while her father worked. That is called childcare. It has been the arrangement of working parents since children and work both existed. Judge Horn looked at Alderman over her glasses. Do you have something more specific, counsel? Alderman produced the Helen Burke statement, handed copies to Karen, to the judge. Garrett stared at the paper on the table without reading it. He already knew what it said. A neighbor witnessed what she believed to be a romantic encounter between Mr. Cole and Miss Marsh, Alderman said. The same witness confirmed the child was regularly left in Miss Marsh's care, often into the evening hours. Often into the evening hours, Karen said, still standing, meaning she was collected before dinner. Which is when working parents typically collect children from childcare arrangements, Your Honor. The objection is noted, Judge Horn said. Move on, Mr. Alderman. Alderman moved on, but the suggestion was in the room now. Garrett felt it settle. The picture being painted, his house as something shifting and unsteady, his judgment as something clouded. He kept his face still, his hands flat on the table. He looked at the stack of documents in front of him and not at Susan. Karen squeezed his arm once, under the table. He didn't look at her either. Then it was Karen's turn. And Karen was good in a completely different way. Quiet where Alderman was polished. Precise where he was smooth. She didn't argue feeling. She argued record. 7 years, 2 months, and 19 days. That was how long Garrett Cole had been the sole primary caregiver for Cora in that time. 41 pediatric appointments documented. 12 dentist visits. 3 emergency room visits. 1 for a playground fall. 1 for a suspected allergic reaction that turned out to be a contact rash. 1 for a fever that spiked high enough to warrant overnight monitoring. All documented. All attended by Garrett, none attended by Susan's 63 school events, conferences, performances, science fairs, field trips requiring parent volunteers. Documented, Garrett present at 61 of them. 2 missed due to work conflicts, with alternate coverage arranged in advance and documented. Susan present at 0. Garrett's name on every emergency contact form. Garrett listed as primary physician contact. Garrett, who knew about the pine nut allergy discovered in October, which Karen mentioned by name, and she watched Alderman's expression not change. Mr. Cole has not been a perfect parent, Karen said. She said it directly, without apology. He has worked late. He has, on at least one occasion, forgotten to sign a permission slip, which his daughter reminded him about the next morning, and which was submitted 1 day late with an explanatory note. He is a human being raising a child alone. She paused. Let that sit in the room. Miss Cole has requested this modification based on changed circumstances. Specifically, her upcoming remarriage to a man who would like Cora to be part of their household. The court will note that this man has never met Cora, that Miss Cole herself has seen her daughter twice in the past 18 months, and that the reason Mr. Cole's childcare arrangements include a neighbor is not evidence of instability. It is evidence of community, which is in fact what responsible parents build. Garrett looked at the table. He thought, do not cry in a courtroom. He thought it very clearly more than once. His eyes stayed dry, barely. Then came the part he hadn't expected. Karen had mentioned it as a possibility. Family court judges sometimes preferred to speak with children directly, in a relaxed setting, not the courtroom itself, a conversation. He'd filed it away somewhere and assumed it might not happen. It happened. Judge Horn set down her pen partway through Karen's summary and said, I'd like to speak with the child. Karen paused. Your Honor, the minor. Cora. Judge Horn looked at Garrett over her reading glasses. Is she available this morning? Karen glanced at him. He said, she's at school. I can have her here in 30 minutes. We'll recess, the judge said. He called Helen Burke, who was back from Phoenix and answered on the second ring and had, as far as he could tell, absolutely nothing more pressing than driving to Cora's school and bringing her to the courthouse. He gave her the script Karen handed him on a notepad. "There are some people who want to meet you. You can say whatever you want. There are no wrong answers." Then he sat down on a wooden bench in the hallway and waited. The fluorescent light in the fixture, halfway down the hall, flickered at irregular intervals. He became aware of this around minute 4 and could not stop noticing it after that. The flicker, the pause, the flicker again. He was a person who had controlled things for 7 years. He had controlled the morning routine and the doctor appointments and the permission slips and the dinner schedules and the bedtime stories and the emergency contact forms. He had controlled all of it, alone, without being asked to, without anyone watching. He had been good at it, and now he was sitting on a wooden bench, while a 7-year-old he had raised from birth was going to walk into a room with a stranger and answer questions about her life. And there was nothing he could do, nothing at all, just wait. Helen arrived with Cora at the 40-minute mark. Cora was in her school clothes, dark jeans, the green sweatshirt with the wolf on it that she'd declared her favorite 3 months ago and worn approximately 4 times a week since. Her hair in the slightly lopsided ponytail she'd started doing herself last month. She had her backpack on. She looked at Garrett and then at the courthouse hallway and then back at Garrett. "This doesn't look like a boring meeting," she said. "I may have undersold it slightly." She looked around again, taking in the details the way she always took in details. Slowly, thoroughly, in the manner of someone building a complete picture before forming an opinion. "Is this about Mom?" He looked at her. "Yeah, it is," she nodded, once, like she'd suspected this for a while and was now having it confirmed. "Is she trying to take me somewhere?" He wanted to say no, automatically, protectively, the way you said things to children to keep the hard parts at a distance. Instead, he said, "She's asking a judge to decide some things, and the judge wants to talk to you." Cora looked at the closed door at the end of the hall. "What do I say?" "Whatever's true," Garrett said. "That's the only rule." "Whatever's true." She looked at him for a long moment. The wolf sweatshirt, the lopsided ponytail, his eyes and nobody else's expression. "Okay," she said. The bailiff came and took her in. The door closed. Garrett sat back down on the bench. Karen sat beside him. Said nothing. He was grateful for the nothing. He looked at his hands, then at the floor, then at the flickering light down the hall that he could not stop tracking. He thought about the night Cora was born. The hospital at 2 in the morning, the quiet efficiency of the nurses moving around the room, and then the moment, the one he'd never found the right words for, not once in 7 years, when they'd put her in his arms and she'd opened her eyes and looked at him. Not at the ceiling, not at the lights above, at him, like she already knew who he was. He'd thought, "I have no idea how to do this," and then, "It doesn't matter. I'm doing it." He'd been doing it every day since. 26 minutes, the door opened, Cora walked out. She came directly to him, sat down on the bench beside him, and then she took his hand in both of hers and held it and didn't say a word. He didn't say anything either. They sat there in the fluorescent light of a courthouse hallway, his daughter's hands around his, the flickering light going on with its business at the far end of the hall. And Garrett Cole, who had not cried in front of another person since the night Susan left, who had built 7 years of steadiness on the understanding that holding it together was the job, who had stood in Cora's doorway 1,000 nights and held everything in, let go not with sound, not dramatically. Just a few seconds of his face doing something he didn't normally permit. Cora squeezed his hands, didn't look at him, gave him the space of it happening without being watched, 7 years old doing that. They went back into the courtroom. Judge Horn took her seat, arranged her papers, put her reading glasses on, then reconsidered, and set them on the desk. Like the decision was already made and the documents were no longer the point. She looked at both tables in turn. "I've heard the testimony," she said. "I've reviewed the documentation, and I've spoken with the child." A pause. Cora is a remarkably clear-eyed young person. She knew what she wanted to say, and she said it without prompting in either direction. "I appreciate that quality in a witness of any age." Garrett's hands were flat on the table. "This court's obligation is to the welfare of the child," Judge Horn continued, "not to either parent's preferences, not to either party's life circumstances." To Cora, she looked at Susan. "Miss Cole?" The court does not doubt that your desire to be more present in your daughter's life is genuine. What is also genuine is 7 years of practical absence, not in the legal sense, in the daily sense. The absence of phone calls returned, of visits made, of the ordinary accumulation of small moments that constitute a real relationship between a parent and a child. Susan's lawyer started to rise. The judge raised a hand without looking at him. He sat. The court has also reviewed the concerns raised regarding Mr. Cole's personal life, including his relationship with Ms. Marsh. She looked at Garrett directly. I want to be clear on this point. A parent who builds community around their child, who allows trusted people into that child's life, who does not raise a child in isolation from the world. That parent is not demonstrating instability, a pause. That parent is demonstrating sound judgment. The characterization offered by petitioner's counsel was not supported by the evidence before this court. The room was vrissé to ill. The petition for modification of primary custody is denied, Judge Horn said. Primary physical custody remains with Mr. Cole. Ms. Cole is granted visitation rights and is strongly encouraged to exercise them consistently and reliably. A schedule for those visits will be determined through a separate proceeding. She closed the folder in front of her. This court is adjourned, the gavel. Garrett sat very still. Karen put her hand on his arm, said something, congratulations, probably, and something about next steps. And the words arrived slightly delayed, the way sound did in a large room when you were only partly present in your own body. Across the aisle, Susan sat with her hands in her lap, looking at the table in front of her. Not crying, not moving. The expression of someone who had known this was possible and hadn't found a way to fully prepare for it anyway. He looked at her, just for a moment, and felt something that wasn't anger and wasn't satisfaction. Something closer to recognition, of a person who had made choices and was living inside them. The same way everyone did, the same way he did. Not forgiveness, that was too large a word for what it was. Just recognition. He stood, shook Karen's hand, said thank you in a voice steadier than he expected it to be, walked out of the courtroom and into the hallway. Cora came off the bench where she'd been waiting with Helen and walked straight into him. He caught her, held on with both arms. You okay? She said, into his shoulder. Yeah, his voice was rough at the edges. Yeah, kiddo, we're okay. She pulled back just enough to look at his face, those clear brown eyes doing their assessment. We're staying? We're staying, she nodded, like she'd walked into that room and said the true things and trusted the rest to follow. Good, she said. I didn't want to have to move my volcano, he laughed. Sudden and real, the kind that surprised you. Helen made a sound beside them that might have been crying or might have been laughing, and was probably both. The parking lot was bright, February sun on fresh snow, the kind of brightness that made you squint even with sunglasses, the kind that happened on days when the sky seemed to be compensating for the cold with sheer luminosity. Garrett stood beside his truck with his keys in his hand and just breathed, in out-cold air, pine. The distant sound of Cora explaining something to Helen about the judge's reading glasses chain normal sounds, ordinary sounds. The sounds of a Tuesday that was going to keep going. He turned around. Denna was standing at the far edge of the parking lot, grey coat, hands in pockets, standing very still among the parked cars like she wasn't entirely sure she should be here. Like she'd made the decision to come and was now second-guessing the logic of it. He crossed the parking lot. You didn't have to come, he said. I know. Her voice was quiet. I couldn't not. He stood in front of her, looked at her face, the composed face that was not quite as composed as usual, that had something in it he recognized as the residue of sustained worry. We won, he said. I know. She exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding it for a while. Helen texted me the second the gavel came down. She really is fast. Faster than anyone I've ever met. They looked at each other. And then Garrett did the thing he hadn't planned. He stepped forward and put his arms around her. Not the considered version of it. Not the careful, measured thing it might have been 2 months ago. Just held her. The way you hold something when you've been afraid of losing it and haven't let yourself say so out loud. She held on back, both arms. No hesitation. They stood there in the February parking lot with the snow bright around them, and Cora's voice in the background and the whole regular world going on in every direction, and he thought, okay, there it is, I'm proud of you, she said. Into his shoulder. He didn't answer, because some things didn't need one. He took Cora to her favorite diner for lunch. Pancakes, ordered from a menu rather than produced by his own efforts, which Cora agreed was the superior system. She had hot chocolate with extra marshmallows. He had coffee, real restaurant coffee, the kind he'd been taking for granted for years without noticing. She told him what she'd said to the judge, not everything, but the parts she wanted him to know. I told her about the yellow blanket, Cora said, cutting her pancakes into precise squares. That you got it when I was a baby, and you still tuck it in even though I tell you I'm too old for that. You're not too old, I know. She ate a square. I told her about how you check my seatbelt, even though I've been big enough to not need checking for like 2 years. And how you memorized the school lunch schedule so you can ask me on Fridays what we had on pizza day. She tilted her head. I don't know why I thought of that one. What did she say? She said, "Tell me about your dad." Cora considered this, turning it over. So I did. He looked at his daughter across the diner table. At the hot chocolate ring above her lip she hadn't noticed. At the wolf sweatshirt and the lopsided ponytail and the face that was partly his and partly her grandmother's, and partly something that was entirely, only, completely Cora. You did great today, he said. She shrugged. I just said true things. That's the hardest kind to say. She thought about this seriously, the way she thought about things that deserved it. Yeah, she said. I think that's right. They drove home in the afternoon light. The mountains on every side, snow thick on the upper elevations, the sky going from the sharp blue of midday toward the softer color that came before dusk. He had the radio on low. Cora fell asleep before they cleared the town limits, cheek against the window, one hand open in her lap. He drove carefully, home. Dina came for dinner that evening, not precisely planned. He texted when they got back. Staying in tonight, making pasta. You're welcome if you want. She'd replied within 2 minutes. I'll bring bread. Be there at 6. That was what she did now. When the door was open, she came. She brought the good bread, the crusty kind from the bakery on Main Street that cost more than bread reasonably should, and was worth every cent of it. Cora woke from her accidental nap approximately 30 seconds after the knock at the door and appeared in the kitchen with her hair at new angles, eyes still soft from sleep, ready to be fully present for whatever was happening. You came, she said to Dina. I came. Did Dad tell you what happened today? Some of it. Dina crouched to Cora's eye level. Are you okay? Cora gave this the consideration it deserved. Yeah, it was kind of scary, but then it was done. She paused. I talked to the judge, I heard. She had nice glasses. On a chain like a necklace, but just for glasses. Cora looked at Dina with complete seriousness. I want one of those when I'm older. Dina looked up at Garrett over Cora's head. Something warm and slightly undone in her expression all at once. He went back to stirring the sauce, after dinner, after the dishes. After 2 chapters of the dragon book and the tucking in and the yellow blanket arranged just the way it needed to be, after all of it, Garrett came back downstairs. Dana was on the couch. She'd made tea, 2 cups, both on the table. She handed him one when he sat. The living room was quiet. The lamp was on, outside, dark now, the snow catching the streetlight and holding it. Thank you for being there today, he said. You already said that, I meant it again. She looked at him. How do you feel? He thought about it honestly. Like something that's been pulled tight for a long time, just let go. He turned the mug in his hands, like I can stand up straight again. She was quiet a moment. I know that feeling, she said. They sat with the tea and the quiet and the ease of 2 people who had stopped performing comfort for each other and were just in it, actually in it. He said, what happens now? Not a question aimed at a specific answer. Just an opening. She said, with us, with everything your company. What you want? A pause. With us, she set her mug down, took her time. My board has been patient, but running everything from here, it's working less well than I'd like to admit. I've been thinking about bringing someone else in to handle the day-to-day operations. Staying on the board but stepping back from the center of it. That's a big move, I know. But I've been the center of that company for 9 years. And I've been good at it. She looked at the window. I want to find out what else I'm good at. What I actually want when the job isn't the answer to that question. What would you do? She looked at him. I don't know yet. Consulting maybe. Something where I can be useful without needing to be indispensable. She paused. I've also been thinking about teaching. The community college here has a business program. I looked into it last week, he nodded, and she said, more quietly, I want to be here. Without always having somewhere else I'm supposed to be at the same time. She turned to face him. I want Cora's soccer games and the dragon book and the bad pancake Saturdays and all of it. I want to be in it, not watching it from across the street. He looked at her. I know you know that, she said. I just wanted to say it plainly, so you knew I was choosing it. Not stumbling into it, he thought about the difference between those two things. Between being present because it was convenient and being present because you'd looked at your life and said, This is the one I want. You know what Cora said to me at the diner today, he said. What? She said she just told true things. That was the hardest kind. Dina smiled, small and real. She's going to be something. She already is something. They sat with that for a moment, then he said, I've been afraid. She didn't rush to respond. Waited for him to finish it, not of you specifically. He searched for the word that was actually true. Of having something I could lose. Cora I can't lose. She's mine no matter what. But this, he looked at their hands, which had found each other somewhere in the last hour without either of them marking the moment. This is something I chose, which means I could unchoose it, or you could. Nobody knows how to manage that, she said. That's not a you thing. That's just what it is. She turned to look at him. You can't make it safe. You can only decide if it's worth the risk, is it? She held his gaze. You tell me. He thought about the parking lot this morning, February sun. Her standing at the far edge, not sure if she should have come. Her hand holding his on this couch. The bread she always brought from the good bakery. The way she listened, fully, without performing it. The way she'd looked at Cora at the science fair with something unguarded on her face. The way she'd stood on her porch in the dark and pressed her hand to her chest so he'd know she was there. The way she'd come back. Across 16 years and a street and a bottle of wine and a broken furnace and a custody case and all the space between then and now. She'd come back and she'd stayed. Yeah, he said. It is. She leaned in. He met her halfway, not the first time. But the first time it felt like neither of them was bracing for it to be taken away. Outside, snow started again. Soft and steady, the kind that fell because it was still winter in the mountains, and that was simply what winter did, without drama or announcement. Inside, the lamp held its circle. The house held its quiet. The tea went cold and neither of them noticed. A week after the hearing, Susan called. He was on the porch with his morning coffee, watching the light come up over the peaks. He almost let it go to voicemail. Then he answered, I'm not calling to fight, she said immediately. Okay, a pause. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For the petition. For the way I handled all of it. Her voice was careful in a way that sounded like it had been rehearsed and then abandoned. I convinced myself I was doing the right thing. I think I was doing the thing that was easiest to believe was right. Which isn't the same. He looked at the mountain line, the morning light going gold across the upper snow. Okay, he said again. I know that's not enough. It's a start. She was quiet. Then, would it be okay if I called Cora sometimes, just to talk? Not to make any kind of case. I just want her to know I'm trying. He'd thought about this. He'd been thinking about it since the moment in the parking lot when he'd looked at Susan across the courtroom aisle and felt recognition instead of anger. He thought about what Cora had done, walking into a room with a judge and saying true things, the bravery of it, the cleanness. He thought about the kind of man he wanted to be, separate from the outcome of the hearing. Separate from whether he'd won. Yeah, he said. You can call her, he paused. But Susan, yeah, if you say you're going to show up, you show up. That's the only rule. She can handle a lot. She can't handle being something you try at and then stop, I know. Her voice was rough now, stripped of the careful rehearsal. I know that. He hung up, sat on the porch with his cooling coffee. He didn't feel victorious. He didn't feel generous. He felt the way you felt when you'd been carrying something heavy for a long time and set it down and your arms were still shaped around the weight of it. It would take time to straighten out. That was fine. He had time. The night it happened, the night Cora asked her question, was a Friday in March. Nothing about it announced itself as significant. Just a regular Friday. Pasta on Tuesdays had been the rule for weeks now, so Fridays were open. And what open meant in practice was soup, and the good bread and the easy disorder of a kitchen being used by people who lived in it. Dina had been there since 5. She and Cora had spread a star chart across the kitchen table and were doing something with a flashlight and a piece of cardboard that had been explained to Garrett twice and that he still didn't fully follow. He'd cooked. This was the order of things now. They ate. Cora was in the middle of a story about her teacher, a story that kept branching into unexpected territory, and eventually arrived somewhere involving a class hamster and a fire drill that had no business being as funny as it was. Dina laughed until she had to set down her spoon. Garrett was smiling the real kind, the kind that happened on its own. And then Cora stopped mid-sentence. Just stopped, put her spoon down on the bowl, looked at her soup, looked at Garrett, looked at Dina. Looked at Garrett again. "Can I ask something?" she said. "You can always ask something," Garrett said. She was quiet for a moment. Setting it up, he'd not learned to recognize this pause. The breath before the thing she'd actually been thinking about, the thing that had been sitting under all the hamster stories waiting for the right moment. "Do you like Dina?" she said. Actually like her. The real kind of like. The kitchen went still, not awkward still, just still. Like everything in the room paused at once to hear the answer. Garrett looked at Cora, then at Dina. Dina was looking at him. She was not going to answer this. That was absolutely clear. This one was his. "Yeah," he said. Cora tilted her head. "How much?" "Cora, I'm asking because I want to know." Completely serious. The way she was serious about things that actually mattered to her. "You look at her like..." She stopped. Searched for the right comparison with the focus of someone who wanted to get it exactly right. Like the way you look at the mountains when the snow comes. You look and then you look away, fast. Like you don't want it too much. Dina made a small sound. Not a laugh. Something softer than that. Garrett looked at his daughter, 7 years old, who had walked into a room with a judge and said true things. Who set an extra place at the table without being asked and had a texting arrangement with the woman across the street. And had apparently been watching him look at the mountains for 7 winters and had noticed more than he'd ever given her credit for. "A lot," he said. "I like her a lot." Cora picked up her spoon. "Okay," she said. Like an item just been checked off a list she'd been keeping. Like the answer she'd been patient enough to wait for had finally arrived and could now be filed in the right place. "That's it," Garrett said. "What else is there?" He looked at Dina. She was looking back at him, not the composed look, not the careful one she used when she was managing the distance between them, just looking at him. All the way in, the way you looked when you'd finally stopped measuring the gap. "I don't know," he said. "I thought there might be more to it." Cora shook her head. "You like her, she likes you, you're both just slow." She took a bite of soup, considered. "It's fine. I figured it out a while ago." "You figured it out, the volcano," she said simply. And returned to the hamster story without missing a beat. Later, after Cora was asleep, he and Dina sat on the couch in the quiet. He said, the volcano," she agreed. "She knew before we did. Probably before we knew we didn't know." He thought about the papier-mâché Saturday. The grey paste in Cora's hair. The way Dina had been at the sink when he came in, and the way she'd looked when she turned around, and how he'd looked away first. "I've been afraid," he said. "I know, not of you. Of..." This he looked at their hands, which had found each other somewhere in the evening without ceremony. "Of caring about something I didn't control. Cora, I can't lose, she's mine no matter what. But this is something I chose. Which means it's something that could go wrong." "It could," she said, simply without flinching from it. "That's not a problem with this specifically. That's just what choosing something means." He looked at her. "You can't make it safe," she said. "You can only decide if it's worth it." "I already answered that, I know." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I just like hearing you say it." They sat there in the lamplight while the snow came down outside and the house held its quiet around them. March moved toward April. The snow changed. Still on the upper slopes, still in the mornings, but with something different in the light. The edge going off the cold. The days lengthening by minutes that you could almost measure if you paid attention. Dina called her bored on a Tuesday morning. She told Garrett about it that evening, standing in his kitchen while he did the dishes, speaking in the unhurried way she spoke when she'd already made up her mind and was just reporting the decision. "I'm stepping back," she said. "Not out. I'll stay on the board, but I'm bringing in someone else to run the day-to-day." He turned off the water. "How do you feel about it?" Terrified. She picked up a towel, started drying, relieved. Both at once she handed him a dry pan. "I think that's how you know it's right." He put the pan away, looked at her. "What are you going to do instead? Consulting?" "To start a few companies I already know well enough that it wouldn't take long to get up to speed." She folded the towel. "And I talked to someone at the community college last week. They have a business program that needs an instructor for the fall semester." She set the towel down. I said I was interested. He looked at her. Also, she said, quieter now. I want to be here. Not managing things from a distance while also trying to be present. I want Cora's games and the Tuesdays and the Dragon Book and all the ordinary stuff. She met his eyes. I want to be in it because I chose it. Not because it's convenient and I'm already here. He crossed the kitchen, stood in front of her. You're already in it, he said. I know. She looked up at him. I just needed to say it out loud. So you'd know I wasn't drifting. I was steering. He thought about the difference between those two things. Between being somewhere because you'd ended up there and being somewhere because you'd looked at everything available and pointed yourself at this. Okay, he said. She nodded. Like it was settled. Like the word had done what it needed to do and they could move forward. A Saturday in April. The snow's mostly gone now except on the high peaks where it never fully left. The street outside edged with green. The pines catching the early light and throwing it back warm. Garrett was on the porch with his coffee, the reliable coffee maker. Helen's recommendation, purchased back in December, ugly and functional and never once dramatic, running in the kitchen. Cora inside somewhere, already planning something, because Cora was always planning something. The house across the street, dark windows this morning. Because Dina was in his kitchen, making tea and arguing with the toaster. He could hear her from the porch. The toaster was, as always, not fully cooperating. He looked at the house across the street, 8 months empty. Then one December morning, a truck, a Mercedes, a woman in a black coat standing on the porch with a phone to her ear. He'd stood in his own doorway and gone completely still and thought, not possible. Then he'd thought, okay. The door opened behind him. Dina came out with her tea and a second mug of coffee for him, replacing the one that had gone cold. She was in his navy flannel shirt, claimed sometime in the past few weeks without discussion, now simply hers. And her own jeans, hair loose in the morning way she wore it before the day got organized. She sat in the other chair, handed him the coffee. They looked at the mountains together. The toaster, he said. It's fine, is it? The bread is a little dark on one side. She sipped her tea. It's fine. He drank his coffee. She drank her tea. Cora appeared in the doorway 4 minutes later in her wolf sweatshirt, holding her star chart and a piece of cardboard, and looking like someone who had a plan that required other people's participation. Can we do the solar system project today? She said. Not a question, not in the kitchen, Garrett said. I wasn't going to say the kitchen. You were going to say the kitchen. She looked at Dina. Dina looked at her. We'll use the table on the porch, Dina said. It's still cold, Garrett said. We'll wear coats, Cora said. He looked at both of them. This alliance that had formed without him, between his daughter and this woman, something he hadn't engineered or planned or controlled, something that had simply happened, the way the things that mattered most seemed to happen, quietly over time, without announcing themselves until they were already fully in place. Fine, he said. Cora disappeared back inside to get her materials. Dina looked at him over her tea. You said fine pretty quickly. I'm working on that. On what? On not needing to manage everything. He looked at the mountains. Some things are better when you leave them alone. She was quiet for a moment. That might be the truest thing you've said since I've known you. I have moments, she smiled. Turned back to the view. He turned back to the view. The light had moved again, the way it did in mountain mornings, working its way across the slopes in a slow, methodical sweep. He'd watched this light from this porch for 9 years. He would watch it longer. Not alone, he thought. There it is, not a sudden realization, not a moment of clarity arriving from nowhere. Just the quiet recognition of something that had been true for a while, and had finally found the right morning to be acknowledged fully. There it was the sound of Cora inside, collecting her materials, narrating her own process in the running commentary she kept when she was organizing. The toaster getting one more chance. The light doing its slow work across the upper peaks, Dina's voice, easy and unhurried. She's going to need more newspaper. There's a stack in the hall closet, he said. She knew where the newspaper was. She knew which closet. She knew the toaster's history and the Tuesday pasta rule, and the yellow blanket and the swear jar and the dragon book, and the name of every kid in Cora's class. She knew where things were in his house because she was here, because she'd chosen to be here. Because they'd both, finally, after 16 years and every kind of wrong turn and detour, pointed themselves in the same direction at the same time, he said. I'll get it. He went inside. The kitchen was warm. The coffee maker quiet on the counter. Cora at the table pulling out her materials with the focused energy of someone executing a plan that had been complete in her head for days. He went to the hall closet, found the newspaper, came back, set it on the table, looked at his daughter, who was explaining to no one in particular the challenge of representing the solar system to any kind of accurate scale. "You can't do it to scale," he said. "Not on a table, I know." She didn't look up. "We're doing conceptual scale. What does that mean?" "It means it looks right even if the math isn't exact." She finally looked up at him. Like architecture, he looked at her. She looked back at him, steady and certain, with his eyes and her own expression and all 7 years of being exactly who she was. "Yeah," he said. Like architecture, he went back to the porch. Dana was still in her chair, tea in hand, watching the mountains do what mountains did in April. Hold the snow on their high places while everything below them started reaching towards something warmer. He sat down. She reached over without looking at him and took his hand. He let her. And the morning light kept moving the way it always had from this porch, touching everything it could reach, making what had always been there look for a moment new. Outside, the house across the street sat quiet in the morning, its windows dark, its driveway empty. The light was all on this side of the road now. That was enough. That was, he understood finally, exactly enough.